Alright, what's up everybody? It's your boy Akeem here to give you my draft grades of the 2016 NFL Draft. For this blog, I'm here to talk about the AFC West Division. Starting with the defending Super Bowl champion, Denver Broncos. I actually have to give them a B minus. They did a pretty decent job with the selections in this year's draft. Starting with their first pick in the first round, they traded up to pick up Paxton Lynch, my number 3 quarterback entering this year's draft, coming out of Memphis. Now he should be the future starter at quarterback, but I think the season is going to start off with Mark Sanchez, and then Lynch is going to work his way to become the starting quarterback of the future. In the second round, a little bit of a question mark here. They picked up Adam Gotsis, the defensive tackle coming out of Georgia Tech. He had a decent season last season. He was actually third team All ACC conference according to the coaches. In the third round, they picked up Justin Simmons, the cornerback coming out of Boston College. Another player that was a little bit confused and disagreed with this selection. But in the later rounds, they did a pretty good job with the pickups. In the fourth round, they picked up a great running back out of Utah in Devontae Booker. Now, he torn his meniscus this past season, but hopefully he's looking to rebound. And he was actually one of the top 5 selections overall in this entire draft that definitely caught my attention most, because the Denver Broncos, they do have C.J. Anderson, but I think that Devontae Booker, being more versatile and catching the football outside of the backfield, he could become the premier starter for the Broncos ground attack. In the 5th round, they picked up Connor McGovern, the guard coming out of Missouri. Not bad of a selection. And in the 6th round, they had 2 selections. First, the fullback coming out of Nebraska, and Andy Janovich. A decent selection. He has good blocking ability. And also in the 6th round, they picked up Will Parks, the safety coming out of Arizona. That was not bad of a selection. He had over 20 pass breakups in his career. And then to round it off, they picked up a punter out of Syracuse and Riley Dixon. And overall, with the draft grade, I had to give him a B minus. The couple question marks was the Adam Gotsis selection, as well as Justin Simmons coming out of Boston College. But in the later rounds, they did a pretty good job with this selection, and I do respect the pick of Paxton Lynch in the first round, so I might have to give them a B minus. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs. They did a pretty good job themselves. They picked up Chris Jones in the 2nd round. They decided to trade back in their first round selection, so they picked up Chris Jones in the 2nd round, and the defensive tackle coming out of Mississippi State to definitely upgrade and keep things fresh in the defensive line. And then in the 3rd round, they picked up Javari Russell, the defensive back coming out of Notre Dame. Disagree with this one. I think they could have picked up a better cornerback, but hey, they did try to load up in cornerback position this past draft. Also in the 4th round, they picked up Parker Ehanger, the guard coming out of Cincinnati, which was a not bad of a selection. 4th round, they picked up, I believe, a better cornerback out of Minnesota in Eric Murray. 4th round, sticking in it, they have a wide receiver coming out of Florida, and DeMarcus Robinson. I think this could be a decent sleeper at wide receiver. Now, during his career, he had pretty non-consistent play at quarterback. He started off the season this past year with Will Grier. Then he had some off-the-field issues, but then there was trading things off with Will Grier and Treon Harris, and DeMarcus Robinson had struggled with productivity because of the poor play of Treon Harris. Not truly trying to pick on Harris, but he's just not the good of a passer of Will Grier. Next up, in the 5th round, they picked up a quarterback out of Stanford, Kevin Hogan. Now, he does have a strong arm, I must admit, and he does a good job as far as making his reads and understanding the play before it develops, meaning reading the defenses. He does have that brains, and being from Stanford, Stanford has a lot of smart people. Sticking in the 5th round, they picked up a great all-purpose player coming out of lower division, out of West Alabama, and Tyreek Hill. Started off his career in junior college, then transferred to Oklahoma State, then transferred down to West Alabama, and he was an all-purpose player in all divisions. And next up in the 6th round, they picked up DJ White, another cornerback from Georgia Tech. And lastly, they picked up Dottie Nichols, the outside linebacker coming out of Virginia Tech. Now, this past season, his numbers went down, but in 2014, he had 10-plus tackles for loss with 72 tackles. I think he could definitely sprout up to become a decent role player in that Chief defense. So overall, I have to give them a B for their efforts. Next up, the Oakland Raiders. I must say they did a pretty good job addressing the defensive side of this year's draft, and even a decent quarterback. Starting off with the first pick in Carl Joseph, the safety coming out of West Virginia. This wasn't a shocker to me. I knew they was probably going to go with a reach here, and I think that Joseph is a pretty good safety, a great hard-hitting safety that can bring some tenacity in that secondary for the Raiders defense. Sticking on the defensive side, their next selection, they picked up Jahid Ward, the defensive tackle / end coming out of Illinois. I did like this selection a lot. 50+ tackles in past two seasons, and they picked up another player in the Big Ten Conference in defensive end out of Shalik Calhoun out of Michigan State. I think this is a great selection. He is an All-American. In the 4th round, they picked up his teammate in Connor Cook, who will be a solid backup for Derek Carr. 5th round, they picked up DeAndre Washington, who is a running back that people have been sleeping on a little bit. He had a great season, not only running the football, but even being a good, effective player, receiving the football out of the backfield. And I think he could become a solid number 2 to Latavius Murray, and even possibly become the number 1 back for that Raider offense. Next up in the 6th round, this was the only question mark of their draft picks in Corey James, the outside linebacker coming out of Colorado State. I think they could have picked up a better outside linebacker in this position. And lastly, a guard from LSU and Fidel Alexander. I think this was a decent selection and given in the 7th round. Now, overall for their picks, I think they did a great job defensively. I had to give them a B+ for their picks. Lastly and not least, I think they had the best draft out of the West, the San Diego Chargers. Starting with the number 3 overall selection to Joey Bosa out of Ohio State. Great career as a Buckeye, and I think this is going to be a good pass rusher for the Chargers defense. I hope he has a good career coming up. Next up in the 2nd round, they picked up a tight end to hopefully become the successor to Antonio Gates and Hunter Henry coming out of Arkansas. Now, Antonio Gates is entering, I believe, his 14th season. That old age is coming in, and he's going to need a good successor under him. I think that Hunter Henry can learn a lot from Gates. Next up in the 3rd round, they picked up Max Turek, the center out of USC, to address the offensive line. I think that was a solid pick. In the 4th and 5th round, they picked up 2 great linebackers. First, inside linebacker in Joshua Perry out of Ohio State. He had 100+ tackles this past season, and another 100+ tackle player in the 5th round, and Jatavis Brown. 116 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, and 12 sacks last season. I think these 2 linebackers can work well together and they have a lot of depth at linebacker. Let's not forget, they still had Denzel Pyramid as well as Melvin Ingram and Manti Te'o, so they're going to be battling it out with these players to see who will be the starting linebackers. In the 6th round, they picked up Drew Kaser, the punter out of Texas A&M. I think this was a pretty good pick. In the 6th round, they picked up J.J. Watt's younger brother and Derek Watt, the fullback out of Wisconsin. I think this was a pretty good selection. And lastly, in rounding things off, they picked up Donovan Clark, the guard coming out of Michigan State. The third player coming out of Michigan State. They kept their eyes on the Spartans team. They picked up a couple of good players. Overall, for their efforts, I have to give them an A-. I did like their draft a lot, and I hope hopefully my man Justin's team will definitely make it back to the playoffs this upcoming season. Now, the next time to catch you guys will be later on this evening, in which I will finish things off with the AFC Conference with the AFC North grades as well as the AFC South. Thank you for watching this vlog. I'm your man, King McCall. Be easy.